Whenever I hear of Tarahumaras, who exactly this community is, where they live, and how they are different if they are.
They really have to walk from village to village or friends to friends through running and hiking over these incredibly steep canyons. Some of the most dysfunctional running we can do is running slow and long. So many people get into saying, hey, I'm going to skip all the 5K, 10K development and go right to the marathon, and you lose all this speed development that's going to help you get so much better, so much quicker. I have a love-hate relationship with that message that came out from Born to Run because the media got a hold of the Barefoot. I hear it all the time. People say, well, I'm not really a runner because I don't do marathons. And that breaks my heart. You know, you're a runner if you can run around the block.
Eric, welcome to our weekly show, Run with Fitpage. It's something that we do with great passion, and we have seen your great love for ultimate human performance, endurance, that is, and you've gone a long way to cover various aspects of it. We thought it would be a great pleasure to go through your journey of what you have done and how you have been contributing to the endurance community more specifically. So nothing could be better than having you on the podcast today.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm really excited. It's always good to talk running, and I'm really excited to talk running with you.
Awesome. Before we get to any of that, how about let's start from the very basic. Let's take it all the way back. How was your childhood, and how running happened to you, really?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and, you know, some of my first childhood memories in our grade system in school, it would be elementary school, we call it, which would be like grade 2 or 3. And I just remember playing out on the playground and being one of the faster people in my grade, and always was kind of one of the better athletes, and doing, again, what every year in our grade school system, we would have what they call field day. And it's similar events to like some of the more rudimentary Olympic. You know, you had the broad jump and jumping events and running, obviously. And I would, you know, always kind of be the fastest there. And that led me to the town I grew up in upstate New York, was a big American football town. And so, based on being one of the better athletes, that's the direction I took. And I was known in the town as a football player, and played in college, as well as did track and field. And so running up until university was always either done on the football field or track and field, or as a way to condition myself for those sports.
Got it. It just seems like football seems to be a common sport for many of good runners. I've interviewed several good runners, and almost every time I've heard that their way to enter running was through football.
I agree. And even what we call soccer too. You know, I've coached many soccer players, or, you know, your football. And I think it's a lot to do with the change of direction from an early age. And we'll get into this later, I'm sure, but the actual sprinting and the short bursts, running like a kid, all that develops agility and keeps our feet underneath us, and kind of really conditions our body in a good structural way that then leads itself to maybe long distance running later on.
Yeah, like what you said, we'll discuss more in detail as we progress. But for now, as a background, I wanted to go through your journey of you starting to run through football, and then you doing it really well in running, and then you became very popular through one of your books, and we'll talk about that as well. But how the progression from football to long distance running, did you get into it once you quit football, or it was more incidental?
Yeah, so after university, I did a spontaneous move from New York to Colorado, which is, you know, for us in the States, that's kind of a big move, you know, and it was a decision I made in about 3 weeks. And it was a place that I had never thought about moving. It just felt right. I had the opportunity to go, and I packed up everything and moved to Denver. And in that once I landed in Denver and was exposed to the mountains, obviously, but this culture of endurance athletics that I wasn't really kind of privy to in New York. And it just opened my eyes to a way to continue to have athletics as a lifestyle, even though I was done with university and wasn't going to play professionally as far as football. It allowed me to continue with athletics in a new way that I could continue to get better for a really long time. That was something I didn't really think about, but was really inspired by. And that was also the time when the Tarahumara Indians had first come to the Colorado Leadville 100 race. And so I started to learn more about these Indian runners down in Mexico.
Got it. So that's what seems to be a way through which you got interested in learning more about Tarahumara, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And back then, this is in the early 90s, so I'll date myself. But, that's when, there's no internet. And the only way you're learning about the Tarahumara Indians is the quick newspaper article about them in the race. And so there wasn't a whole lot of information on them. So they became this mythical figure that you kind of created this mindset in your mind of what they were like, running with sandals and running, hundreds of miles as part of their life. So it was a really fun time to have all of this new type of sport to me be exposed and to explore.
Beautiful. Whenever I hear of Tarahumaras, and of course I was introduced about this word particularly as well through the book Born to Run. What exactly are you referring to? I heard you talking about Indians. I want people to be aware it's not India Indians, Mexicans, I guess. And you should walk us through who exactly this community is, where they live, and how they are different if they are.
So the Tarahumara Indians are what they call themselves the Raramuri, and those two words mean the running people. And so they're in Mexico, in the central Mexico, in the depths of the Copper Canyon, which is much, much larger than the Grand Canyon in the States. So very, very steep canyons, very, very rugged terrain, and they live deep in the canyon. And as a community, some they live in homes that they've built themselves on the side of the mountain, and they live kind of still, living on their own and subsiding by themselves as a culture. So they not only run for their community, and we'll get into that in a minute, but they also run as transportation. And there's not very many roads into the canyons. So they really have to walk from village to village or friends to friends through running and hiking over these incredibly steep canyons. So, yeah.
Staying at it, when did you learn more about them? Was it through the Leadville 100 when they came for it and you got interested, or it was after meeting Chris McDougall I'm talking about, and how did you make a decision that you wanted to know and study more about them?
Being in Colorado at the time of their racing at the Leadville 100 was, again, the first time I've heard about it. And then being in Colorado, we were privy to, a lot of information, a lot of people talking about seeing them at the race. So, kind of word spread about what they're doing. And so, again, it kind of took on this mythological athlete in your head of what they do. And then through the 90s, I was racing a lot. I was doing a lot of triathlons, doing a lot of adventure racing, and of course, a lot of mountain running. And, through that time, as more technology and more information came about, you started learning more and more about them. But then fast forward, it wasn't until 2005 when Christopher McDougall, author of Born to Run, was commissioned to do an article on my training here in Jackson for Men's Journal. And so we met actually in Denver to do this article. And that was a week after he came back from the Copper Canyon for the first time, when he first heard of the Tarahumara Indians. So when we met to do this article, we hit it off immediately because I wanted to know everything he learned. And we had this common bond immediately of something to talk about and bond over. So that's kind of how this came together. That article, we were planning to spend 3 days doing this article on my coaching. After the first day, I went back to my hotel room, and that first day, Chris was really bummed out about his running. And I could tell he was really frustrated that, he was always injured and just could never be the runner he wanted to be. So I ripped up the script for this article and decided the next 2 days I was going to teach him how to run. And so, again, long story short, at the end of those 3 days, he asked me to coach him. And our plan was then to go back to the Copper Canyon and run this 50-mile race, which ultimately became the backdrop to the story in Born to Run.
Got it. And when he met you, he had come back after meeting the community, but he had not written the book yet, because I guess the book was published in 2009, the first edition, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, he actually went down to Mexico on his own assignment for his first book, which was about a Mexican pop star that got into some trouble. So he was researching for this book. But then that's when he started to hear about these runners down there, and he was working for Runner's World at the time. So he was naturally interested in that as well. So he learned more while he was down there, came back, and then that's when we kind of devised this plan to go back down.
Got it. And staying with the Tarahumaras, I'm so fascinated by their stories. When I read of it first time, I looked up on YouTube, tried to find every possible video to understand who they are, how they just can run so much and make it look so effortless. Also, there were a bunch of content pieces, research that existed at different places. I went through all of that, and almost everyone I will meet who knows about them, I will talk to them about it. And today here we are discussing the whole episode almost about it. So let's go through that to understand a little more in detail. How are they different? How are they not like us, for example, or how are they like us? Because the Western way of training is very particular. It's peculiar. Almost everyone trains 80-90% in the same way, and the remaining, possibly there is a slight difference. But in this case, doesn't seem like they train for running particularly, but that's their way of living, for hunting, persistence hunting, etc., etc. So how are they similar or different to the way we train, all of us train?
I think first and foremost, their form of training is part of their lifestyle. Like I mentioned earlier, part of that lifestyle being transportation. So, young kids are walking, long distances is probably as soon as they can walk. So they're developing that endurance as soon as possible. And this is up and over, very, very steep terrain, daily. Secondly, they play a game called Rajapari, which they take a wooden ball, they carve it out of a tree branch, and it's kind of maybe a little bit bigger than American baseball, but it's wooden, and they have teams. And there's 2 teams and 2 balls, and each team kicks the ball back and forth as a team over a prescribed route, and they decide how long they're going to go before the game starts. And the idea is to kick the ball as a team back and forth. Obviously, the first team across the finish line, or however long they've decided to run that day, is the winner. But what this is actually a form of what we talked about earlier, of agility and sprinting and resting, because they're kicking the ball, they're sprinting to go to get the ball. It's almost like kind of like soccer in a way. So there's a lot of fast running and then a lot of rest, a lot of fast running and a lot of rest. So they're developing speed as an early kid. And they're doing the shorter races, and at school, and then as they mature and become 18 and move up to the adult game, that's when it gets really long. So in a way, they're developing the speed and strength first, and then as they get older, they start to go longer. And I think that's maybe one thing we can talk about, where a lot of, especially recreational runners, get into the marathon mode or more, and they focus first on endurance. And I think it maybe should be done the other way around.
This is very inquisitive for me, so I'll request to stay here for a bit and help me understand. You're right. As we start to run, we are told first to build the stamina, first to build the endurance, and as we build a bigger base, then we are asked to build speed. And while starting the run as well, right in the start, we are introduced to certain sprints, which is strides, for example. But it's almost limited to that, because we are told that the faster you run, higher chances of you getting injured if you're not trained well and if your musculoskeletal system is not trained well. So please help explain this to me, how sprinting first before building the endurance is going to help us run faster, for that matter.
Yeah, I'll start with disagreeing with the statement that speed is what gets runners injured. From my experience, running slow poorly is the most destructive thing we can do. Because if we can't run slow well and using our muscles and activating things properly, what are most runners doing most of the time? They're running easy, building that base. So most of what they're doing throughout their week is destructive. In general, the slower we run, the harder it is to have good form. The more ground contact the more time we spend on each foot gives us more time for dysfunction to take place. So with that in mind, what happens then when we do sprints or speed up? We reduce our ground contact time, which is a good thing. We spend less time on each foot, which is a very, very good thing for injuries. Okay, so ground contact time is one of the proven points for having injury-free running. So again, if you look at a lot of the elite systems, especially what takes place is the same thing as the Tarahumara Indians are doing. They go through high school, they're doing cross country, they're running fast. They go to university, they still run fast. They may get their pro contract, they're running fast for as long as they can, and then they go to the marathon. Okay? Where recreational runners are doing just the opposite. So I guess the point is that from my experience, some of the most dysfunctional running we can do is running slow and long, because for all the things I just mentioned.
Sure. So if people were listening to it and they thought, hey, Eric told some of really cool things, which are running slow is not necessarily going to make you run faster, or it's going to be very good from sustaining performance point of view. And then a related point, you talked about GCT, which is the ground contact time. For people's reference, we are referring to the time that we spend on ground between two steps, between stride. And the lesser it is, it basically means that you're crisp, you are taking the next step very quickly, because the longer you stay on ground, higher chances that you're loading a lot more, and higher chances of you getting injured as well, is what I'm understanding. I think the elites have 150, 160 millisecond kind of average GCT, something like that. And then as we get to more and more recreational runners, it goes all the way to 300, even 350, 400 milliseconds, isn't it?
Correct. Now I'll use Christopher McDougall as an answer, or as an example. Training him for Born to Run 50-mile race. Here's a guy who was always broke down, always injured. Doctors told him he shouldn't be running. He's 6'4", at that time, 240. Again, always injured. And we did not have a very long time to get him ready for 50 miles. And so the natural thing would be to do, okay, we got to get your long run up. We did just the opposite. I threw sprints and hill repeats and everything at him to build strength and speed first. And then he went right into doing 3 hours running, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but we were short on time. But the point being was that the sprints, the strength running, and the skills and drills I had him do developed his structural system, allowing him then to run better longer.
Okay, so now again, it may be slightly just anecdotal because it's from my experience that if I return to running and I start running fast too quickly, I start to get aches and pains almost everywhere. Every joint, it seems like it hurts really bad after a good hill run
Yep.
or even 200-meter repeats. What is happening here? Is it because I'm not adapted to that kind of training, or if I continue to be at it, I'm going to get injured? That doesn't seem to be the case from the narrative that you just explained. But people who are listening to this conversation, they are very, very anxious to know
Yeah.
about it because they go through something similar for sure.
Okay, so one mistake that happens, and we haven't talked about run form. This can kind of go back into your question about the Tarahumara Indians and their form. But one mistake runners make when running faster or running at all, biggest mistake is overstriding, where using this in this case, thinking about running your 200 meters, right? Common mistake is to want to reach out in front to get your distance per stride versus using elastic energy and force into the ground to propel you forward to get your distance per stride and not overstriding. So to answer your question, without seeing you run, my guess is you're probably overstriding and therefore not, firing and using your muscles appropriately. That's giving you those aches and pains. And, there's a lot that goes into this. A big part of, especially for the recreational runner, is to understand what is appropriate speed for you. And you could simply just be trying to run your 200 meters too fast. And there I would say, hey, instead of starting out with 200 meters, maybe think about 10 seconds. Okay. Now you're able to run really fast, but it's only 10 seconds. Huge difference.
I'm going to come back to this, but before that, when you say overstriding for everyone's benefit, we are saying that you may be landing away from your body, and the recommendation is that you land in front as close to the body as possible, without, of course, we being together and you seeing the running form. That's what we mean by optimally striding, isn't it?
Correct. In Born to Run 2 that we wrote a couple of years ago, we use a simple 5-minute test for people to understand where proper foot strike is. And for the listeners out there, a simple way to understand run form and how to strike the ground is simply to run in place. I don't even have to coach you how to do that. No one's going to heel strike. No one's going to overstride. You're naturally going to jump like you're jumping rope. You're going to naturally land subtly on your forefoot using your elastic energy. And then you use that drill to understand how you strike the ground and then take that into slightly providing force into the ground to move forward.
Right. People who are listening to it, they are possibly now even more curious to see and say, hey, it seems like we've been doing almost everything wrong. That is, we are always told that the bigger the base of the pyramid, the better and the faster you're going to be as you start to get faster. If people listening to it thought, hey, they are convinced that is not the way to go ahead, and it makes more sense to start building speed as soon as you start training. Would you spend few minutes, please, and talk about how should people look at starting to get on their running journeys, or even if someone is an intermediate runner like me for that matter, how should I look at making some changes in my training? And I definitely know that it has to be more contextual because you need to have a lot more information about me, and so I don't want to sound for it to be too generic, but maybe we can take one persona as an absolute beginner, and the second one we can take as someone who has been running for a few years but not been as fast, for example, and then we could take it from there.
Yeah, I think the biggest starting point, maybe with any runner, is to understand why they're running. We hear the why and really investigate what that why is for you. And especially with the beginning runner, to make sure that the purpose initially is to keep running feeling as good as possible. And with that, try not to let your why be for fitness or weight loss or anything else other than to go out and to make it joyful. Now, that might sound really counterintuitive and contradictory to sprinting, but running fast should feel very good, okay? And so I think really understanding why you want to run, and to that beginning runner, make it as easy as possible at first. And that might mean go out, run for 5 minutes, and maybe think about doing less but more often, 5 minutes every day, versus going out for 45 minutes 2 or 3 times a day or 2 or 3 times a week. Okay. And so the point is that frequency is extremely helpful, but I'll leave it here too, is that we don't want to see this as a workout. We don't want to see this as building fitness. We want to see it as something that we want to go out and do for the pure joy of running, because then we will enjoy it, which will then allow us to keep doing it. If we see it as a workout or for fitness or for weight loss as a beginner, it's not going to feel very good, and we probably won't want to keep doing it. My goal as a coach and inspiring people to start running is keep it feeling good and don't see it as a workout, and let that progress, right? And then dive into goals and see where it takes you. But we can get into that. But for you, I think, let me back up a minute. And we're talking about, building, maybe going against the pyramid. But maybe what I'll say here is that the pyramid of base building, from my perspective, includes strength, speed, and endurance. So those 3 pillars I infuse into my base building. So running easy is a part of that. My point was that, especially with the marathon boom, so many people get into saying, hey, I'm going to skip all the 5K, 10K development and go right to the marathon. And you lose all this speed development that's going to help you get so much better, so much quicker.
The previous point that you talked about, where we said learning to, enjoy the joy of running, primarily to experience that. And it's quite a journey, in my opinion, because the more and more beginners I talk to, what I hear from them, they find running intimidating. And B, the beginners look for results a lot quicker than the more experienced athletes. So how do we also work on the mindset shift? Because from your experience of training people, I'm sure you'll have some wisdom nuggets that we can take from here.
It's important not to put a label on the type of running we want to do as individuals. Again, saw it in triathlon with Ironman, and I see it now with Ironman, and now especially marathon and ultra marathoning, is that the longer distances tend to get a lot of recognition to the recreational runner, because that's what the media grabs a hold of. Not many recreational runners know who some of the best 5K runners are in the world, but they may know who some of the best marathoners and ultramarathoners are, because again, that's what's in front of them. And so I think it's important to not think it's marathon or nothing. And I think that does the running community, especially beginners, a big disservice when the marathon and longer distances get so much voice that I hear all the time people say, well, I'm not really a runner because I don't do marathons. And that breaks my heart. You're a runner if you can run around the block, and so I think where I'm going with this is that, get outside the labels, and, if you go to the track and run around the track once, you're a runner, and let that manifest. Let that be a lifelong journey, and don't see it as something that's going to end next year. I just seeing it as a lifestyle, and that joyful part, I think, is so crucial, even though there's some training elements that will help any runner.
Yeah. No, I think this is so critical what you said. beginners underestimate themselves if they are not as good as the one next to them, who has very different running experience, very different genetics, very different physiology, and very different running commitment and reason to why the next person is running. And that makes them unhappy and most of the times not be appreciating enough of their own efforts. And I think that's such a great point to mention, that so long as you can take the next step, you are a runner. So long as you can get out and you are just committed to be able to wear your running shoes or not, and then get out to be out briskly on a stroll or a jog or whatever matters, you are a runner. It's just the pace that you can acquire over a period of time, isn't it?
If there's a beginner runner looking at a group of runners, maybe their friends are all runners and they consider themselves not a runner, and they all do races. Again, that racing tends to get like a lot of the discussion. But if you ask that group of runners if they could do one or the other, run for joy or run to race, they would all say run the joy, and they would run no matter what, right? But that's never gets talked about to the beginner. It's always, hey, here's my medal. But if they heard, hey, I would run every day no matter what, whether I could race or not, I think that needs to get more of the conversation to these beginning runners of what it can do for you just as a lifestyle on a day-to-day basis. Here you've got 45 minutes for yourself or with friends that really can set up your day to, that it's the magic pill for a lot of things that we know can help with not only health, but, mindset, mental clarity, all of that.
Yeah. No, makes a lot of sense, and I'm wanting to take a bit of diversion and rather go back to the previous point where we were talking about Tarahumaras. And one of the things that you talked about, that their base seems to be built really well, where they're doing natural, free sport movements. They're building speed and endurance both. They're doing more like sprint workouts almost during the entire game that they are playing, and not necessarily they're running. That seems like a great training component, and something similar that's taught to us as well. When we grow up in villages, we have a lot more to run around for, and whether we are going to take our cows for grazing, or we are running around, running behind bullock carts and bikes and things like those, which doesn't happen as much. But when I grew up, it was all happening and I enjoyed it thoroughly, honestly. Maybe some of these are my most memorable moments of childhood. So that's from training perspective, in a way that builds the base for a great machine. As you learned and studied more about Tarahumaras, did you see a difference in the way they ate, in the way they nutritionally took care of themselves versus us, or it was similar?
I think was by default because of they're so secluded. They, eat maize, they grow maize, corn, beans, chickens, a little bit of cattle. So they're forced to eat almost the same thing almost every day. I mean, when we were down there spending a week with them, we made, the only thing that changed was maybe chicken to fish one day or chicken to a cattle one day, but it's a staple of beans and corn, and not a lot of variety. So I think I don't know if there's a magic pill there other than they just aren't overeating, and there's not a lot of variety. I think the biggest thing is they weren't exposed to junk, and as the race that we went down to, that's become quite popular race now. And so now there's more and more roads being built. So there's more and more commercialism infiltrating these towns. And so now you see them drinking Coke. And the fear is now that they're being, getting vehicles and, regular shoes and more junk food. So I think it's not so much what they eat, it's maybe what they don't eat.
Got it. Seems like the grains that are easily available to be grown there are what they resort to, and it seems like it's going to more processed way, which has been the curse almost most of the places
Right.
in the world. I remember when I go back to my village now, the kids when they're growing up, I don't hear of them they talking about going to the next village for so we used to have these community meals when there were different events or so, but rather I hear of them they talking about going to the city for a burger. They will want to celebrate their birthdays with large piece of cake which they will bring from 50 kilometers away, which I remember when I was growing up it used to be condensed milk. We were celebrating our birthdays with that if we were privileged for that matter. So things are changing a lot and it seems like not for great. So that seems to be the case here as well with the Tarahumaras. Hopefully they don't get that influence by it. As I read more of them, and you talked about when they came to Leadville 100, that was such a crazy output. I guess 93 if I'm not wrong.
It was 92 and 93. Yeah.
93,
Yeah.
right, 92 and 93, and I guess 94 again, and Trace, and she won it with a course record. And in 93 the winner, Mr. Churro, was he was above 50 if I'm not wrong, who came first. So the whole world would have gone after seeing what is happening here. And when you saw him running, why I'm talking about is because Leadville 100 is not an easy feat. And when he ran, did he run like others? Did he eat while running like others? Was he taking a break to eat something similar to what the other more Western runners were eating, or he had his own way of doing it?
Definitely had their own way of doing things. And, we saw that firsthand in the Copper Canyon when we raced with them. A lot of pinole. They pretty much relied on pinole, which is ground up corn and water, as their energy source during the race. And I don't know if you knew this too. I can't remember what year it was, but it was either the second or the third year. A shoe company brought shoes for them and sponsored them to run Leadville. And midway through the race, they took the shoes off and put their sandals back on. So my point being is they were very reluctant to do anything new. And that was the same with their nutrition.
Got it. And that sounds right. What I was trying to get to was actually what exactly were they consuming? So it seems like they were also consuming, of course, carbs, but was it simple carb, as is the case with the energy gels and other sports drinks, or it was anything else? Because I'm not very familiar with that kind of food.
Yeah, so I can only speak to what I really witnessed when we were down racing with them in the Copper Canyon. And at those aid stations, they had pinole, which again is ground up corn that you kind of drink. So it would be like a carb drink, but just ground up corn, no additives, no sugar. And then there was several aid stations that had some grapefruit. So us gringos brought all our gels and all our other stuff, but from what I witnessed, they were mostly relying on pinole. And I would argue that they're probably so fat adapted that they probably don't need much anyways.
Yeah, that's in fact, fat adapted discussion. We can go on for another hour, but for
Sorry.
uh, a good point for next next
Right.
episode, I guess, because that will be such an important variable for people to keep in mind. Now, staying here, you mentioned another topic, and thank you for putting in these small nuggets so that the sequence of questions is very natural. That is about the sandals, the great sandals that they run in, and this is what I guess drove, inspired, got a number of runners, ultra runners primarily, to move to barefoot running or sandals. So many brands got inspired from it, and we saw so many product models that started to come about as well. Let's talk about the sandals. What exactly do they wear when they are running? Is it made at home? Is it something that they go and find from somewhere? And how does it really help them run?
Yeah, so they're essentially old truck tires that the tires have been retired from. They've just been too worn to be on a vehicle, and so they're just discarded tires that they measure their foot and carve out the measurement of their foot with the tire truck tread, and then they use leather strapping to strap them to your foot. And so we had a cobbler, so to speak, make some for us, but most of the runners and be making their own because they've have to do it so often that they probably became really good at making their own. But it's essentially just, tracing out your foot tire from a truck and running on that rubber.
So no high heel to the forefoot drop, no extra cushion that's being provided.
Yeah, the ones I have, I think, are 10 to 12 mil. What they also are, and there's maybe a perception about what minimal shoes are or what they're using. These truck tires are very rigid. They're very hard. So they're not very flexible, which gives them the protection they need because their trails are very, very rugged. A lot of small, sharp rock that would hurt. So these are very rigid platforms that gives them the protection, but not a lot of cushion.
Got it. Yeah, so 10, 12 mil or 15 mil even is not the kind of shoes that we wear currently. In fact, our stack height difference itself is about 6 to 10 mil currently, and the heel cushion seems to be going all the way till 35, 40 mm, isn't it?
I have a love-hate relationship with that message that came out from Born to Run because the media got a hold of the whole barefoot movement. And if you go back and read Born to Run, it wasn't until I think page 103 that barefoot was even mentioned. So then it became a label and it became a trend and it became all or nothing. And I think that did the whole message a disservice. And how I use minimal running, it's more about learning run form and strengthening your feet to have a solid foundation, and then pick the shoes that you need for the distance or the terrain you're running.
Yeah. I think the underlying message that I'm getting from it, Eric, that is that instead of relying heavily on any equipment or any tool for that matter, go with something that you are comfortable to start with, make movements as natural as possible, and over a period of time, much like how a kid learns, much like how Tarahumara learned, we would learn as well what is right for us. And it's not a shoe or a gel or a dry fit t-shirt that makes us run faster or better, but rather the sheer training, the commitment to be consistent and being at it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Consistency, like I said earlier, frequency is key. I think, when we're talking about beginners, they're coming in it from a really good spot because they have a clean slate. They have a clean canvas and they can work on strengthening their feet and working on run form because they have no background in it. It's there where it's sometimes the easiest. It's the veteran runner who becomes broken down and they need to change things. It becomes very, very challenging to change things because they have so much muscle memory as a veteran runner.
Yeah. Listening to this conversation, I'm very sure a bunch of runners are already starting to think of making an outreach to you. But before they do that, I wanted to understand, do you take coaching assignments currently that is online, and what are the kind of runners or athletes who should be reaching out to you? What kind of journeys or goals they have that it will be a suitable relationship to work together?
So I say I work with winners, beginners, and all in between. And The only common thing I need from a runner is that they have a big goal. They have a why for themselves that gives us the roadmap to work towards. So if any runner of any abilities out there who has something that they want to accomplish, that's really all I need from a coaching standpoint. And from my services, I do personal coaching, which I can do anywhere in the world. I've coached, athletes from India and all over the world. And that usually is race based. People that I'm coaching online are usually training for some type of race. I also do Zoom consultations, whether it's run form, video run form. I do performance consulting if they have a topic. Hey, they've been injured, or nutrition. Hey, they can't put nutrition together for their race. Any specific topics that we can cover by Zoom That's my consulting. And then I also have pre-made training plans on my website, as well as books and training camps. So, yeah,
That's quite a buffet for people
yeah.
for people to choose from, and thank you for giving back to the community because um, it's that only that will take the message and spread the education awareness. Thank you for doing that. I know today's conversation we started from your journey and went to discuss Tarahumaras and their training principles, but why it's so unique also is because you have witnessed it from very close quarters, and learning from them is just so important. Otherwise, it's various content pieces we read up online, and then we get influenced or not. But here there is a first hand experience that we all can learn from, and that is why I guess this conversation becomes fairly unique. Towards the end of it, I would like to understand, we runners are greedy, and so I'm saying this. What are some of the tips that you would like to give to us runners who are either struggling to continue or running not doing as well? Because performance is a great success metric all of us are obsessed with. Not sure great, because it also puts us under a lot of pressure. But what are some of the wisdom nuggets that you think we can learn from?
It's seeing almost running as a lifestyle and not putting a label on it. And, I'll speak to myself, every year I try to do something a little different to keep it fresh. And I don't call myself an ultra runner because I'm not an ultra runner all the time. I'm just a runner. And I think finding, here's what I'll say is that if we see ourselves finding a way for running to be fun, that's the ultimate goal. But with that, fun looks different for everybody. I enjoy training. I enjoy running hard up a mountain. That's fun for me, where fun could be going out with a bunch of friends and just chatting. Or there's just so many different ways for running to be fun, making it adventurous, traveling for destinations and finding a place to go travel to and run. There's so many ways for you to find a way for running to be fun. And I think you deserve it to yourself to find that for you. And then it could be a lifestyle for a very, very long time, and a healthy one.
Awesome. I know it may have disappointed some of runners thinking they were looking for a
Yeah. All right. So I'll give a nugget. All right. So, all right. I think one tip that every runner should do, from my perspective, is train their feet. Okay. So if we use the climbers analogy, I live in the mountains. We have a lot of climbers here, and climbers train their fingers and hands all the time because it's their lifeline. Their fingers need to be strong because it's what's holding them on the rock. If they don't have strong fingers, they're going to fall. And a lot of times that's not a good thing. Okay. How does that relate to running? Well, everything we do running is with our feet, but nobody trains their feet. Okay. And the strength of our arch and using our big toe and having good, strong foundational muscles in our feet are a very, very good thing. But what's not talked about is when we train our feet, we train other muscles all the way up through our hip that are vital for run health. For example, how we train the feet turn on our glute muscles. And most runners out there might understand how important glute muscles are, but it's how we use our feet that fire that. And that's where the form and simply barefoot style training of the feet will help every runner out there for longevity, performance, ground contact time. It's the holy grail of strength for runners, the foundation. Okay. Just like fingers for a climber. So if you think about how important fingers are for climbers, see your feet as that important for you as a runner. And again, a simple way is take the shoes and socks off and simply try to balance on one foot and see how challenging it is. That will let you know how important it is. Most people can't balance on their foot, okay? But we're doing it tens of thousands of times for a marathon.
Yeah. So this is one point, like how we figure out how our feet are if we remove our shoes and socks and try to balance on a plain surface. The very, I guess, evident question that's going to come, including from me, that is, how do I train my feet? It seems like there are a lot of information that's available, but are there some specific ways through which we train our feet, or it can be just try to squeeze your feet or XYZ, or what is it?
That's the great thing. It's so simple but so potent, and the people out there listening to me describe this are going to kind of roll their eyes until they get up and do it. So again, it's simply balancing using. I'll have my athletes use ski poles sometimes, and they're balancing on their forefoot of their foot. So they just elevate the heel just off the ground a little bit, and they're balancing on their forefoot while they're using an aid. And then I have them do movements with the other leg to add challenge. But for most people out there, just balancing on their whole foot is going to be challenging enough. To take it to the next level, if you're balancing on your flat foot, close one eye and start to understand and feel the challenge that big toe has to be stable while you have one eye closed. Then close both eyes and create that awareness of what your foot has to do to stabilize while your eyes are closed. And again, regardless of form, every step we take as a runner, we're asking our body to be stable at the arch and at the big toe. And most people are not strong there, which creates a vicious cycle all the way up through the hips. The point is, keep it simple. It's not rocket science. There's so many equipment and tools and gadgets out there. Take your shoes and socks off and just find different ways for you to balance. And try not to use like a cushion. We want to be on very stable terrain. Our feet crave stability. So try not to use those cushions that you might find in a gym to make the balance harder. No, we want to be on a hardwood floor.
I think it's such an important point, and it never occurred to me. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak to my coaching team, and we'll maybe create a 5 minutes tutorial or something. This could just come handy for people to train their feet. It's such an important point, I guess.
See, it's the perfect warm-up, because in doing that, you're turning your electrical system on. You're firing your brain and your neuromuscular system to activate all these muscles, so they're firing when you go out to run. So it's a great 5-10 minute warm up that you can either do at home before you head out the door, or ideally you want to do them barefoot so you can really engage the feet. But again, you can do them anywhere. That's what's so simple, but it's so potent.
Yeah. No, thank you. And this makes so much sense. And I'm definitely going to try out, and definitely going to have a small content piece ready for people to follow. This was such a good conversation, and I know we have taken 1 whole hour. It's already late evening for you. Thank you for adjusting the schedule and being so available. Very, very indebted on behalf of all the runners and our listeners. And I hope we get to speak again at some point and talk about fat adaptation for sure. That will be very, very helpful.
Let's definitely do an episode 2. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for your time today. I truly appreciate it, and I look forward to speaking again soon. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.